Shabbat Shalom and happy Purim Yasharala. Thank y'all for joining me today. But y'all know the deal. I usually do this before we press record because you can't really hear the sound on the recording, but I didn't blow it. I already got the chat blowing me up with the trumpets. So let's do it. Let's do it. Even if you're watching this later, why not? Why not blow the trumpets? Echo the voice of the Most High and put fear into Hasatan. Let's do it, Yasharah. Right. Now, allow us to pray. Heavenly Abba, we come to you with a humble spirit. And if our spirits need to be humbled, humble us, Abba. We truly, if we're here, we're seeking your face, Abba. We need to be humbled. Please chasten our spirits, our ruachs, that we do not veer too far to the left or to the right from your narrow path, and that we can be corrected and we can come to a repentance that when we seek you, we will find you and know that you are there. Not just believe, but know that you are the creator. Know that you're a heavenly father and know that you care for us. We're here on Purim, the day of the Feast of Lots, and we are praying to be a part of your lot, which is chosen by you and your only begotten. Tawada Abba, for all that you do and all that you are. Bahashem Yasha, we pray, Amen. And Amen. Let's do this. Oops. That was my screen. Wrong button. All right. Now we're open the book of Esther. But before, I got a little intro. Before we start off chapter 1, verse 1, we will be reading the entirety of the book of Esther. And this entire book is the story of the festival of Purim. Purim can also be called simply the festival of lots. I just wanted to, we'll read this a couple times in chapter 3 and 9 of Esther. They give us the definition of Purim, lot, and it's a special feast that was ordained during this time of the book of Esther, when they were in the captivity of Medo-Persia after the Babylonian Empire. We will read about that immediately in chapter 1, I believe, that Mordecai is an older man that was alive during the Judah departure to Babylon captivity, and now we're at the reign of Medo-Persia Empire. But we will go more into all of this as we read it in this book. And lastly, I wanted to go over the timeline. All right, so I'm going to back out real quick just so you can see the timeline I'm using. The world history chart. And so we have the entire timeline. We see the Exodus right here, around, at least dated apart on this chart, around 1500 BC. And then around 1000 BC, we see the division of the kingdom after King Solomon. And then scrolling down, about 600 BC, we have the Nebuchadnezzar invades Judea to obviously the captivity of Babylon. And then roughly 100 years later, here we are with the story of Esther and Mordecai. This is the second captivity, as we just looked at. And the Grecian Empire was the story of the Maccabees. So just showing how it all fits in history. We have Daniel is probably the main book of someone in captivity in Babylon. After that, We have Esther and Mordecai, Malachi, and then we have the Greek captivity, Judas Maccabeus, and that will be the book of Maccabees. All right. So this is where we are at right now in the history of the Israelites, or specifically the Jews. And Benjamin, we're going to see that Mordecai is a Benjamite, not technically. He's from Judea. I mean, in the southern kingdom of, with the Jews. So they all are called Jews. But understand, there were Levites, Benjamites, and actual Jews from the tribe of Judah, which we'll get into right here. All right, so that being said, let's get started. Chapter 1, verse 1, the book of Esther. Going to have the audio reader do the reading from the KJV as our base, and then I will be reading from the Septuagint as we read along to add more context. Here we go. Let's go.
The book of Esther, chapter 1. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus. This is Ahasuerus, which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia, over 127 provinces.
Ahasuerus will be called Xerxes, as we see in some translations, or Artaxerxes in the Septuagint. There's going to be some slight name differences, but same person.
That in those days, when the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan the palace, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all his princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and princes of the provinces, being before him. When he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 180 days, and when these days were expired, the king made a feast unto all the people that were present in Shushan the palace, both unto great and small, 7 days, in the court of the garden of the king's palace, where were white, green, and blue hangings, fastened with cords of fine linen, and purple to silver rings and pillars of marble. The beds were of gold and silver, upon a pavement of red and blue and white and black marble. And they gave them drink in vessels of gold, the vessels being diverse one from another, and royal wine in abundance, according to the state of the king. And the drinking was according to the law. None did compel, for so the king had appointed to all the officers of his house that they should do according to every man's pleasure. Also Vashti, the queen, made a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, and Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcas, the 7 chamberlains that served in the presence of Ahasuerus the king, to bring Vashti the queen before the king with the crown royal, to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was fair to look on. But the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by his chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him. Then the king said to the wise men, which knew the times, for so was the king's manner toward all that knew law and judgment. And the next unto him was Karshena, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Mares, Marsena, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, which saw the king's face, and which sat the first in the kingdom. What shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to the law, because she hath not performed the commandment of King Ahasuerus by the chamberlains? And Memucan answered before the king and the princes, Vashti the queen hath not done wrong to the king only, but also to all the princes, and to all the people that are in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus. For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes, when it shall be reported, the king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she came not. Likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto all the king's princes, which have heard of the deed of the queen. Thus shall there arise too much contempt and wrath. If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it be not altered, Let Vashti come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she. And when the king's decree which he shall make shall be published throughout all his empire, for it is great, all the wives shall give to their husbands honor, both to great and small. And the saying pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. For he sent letters into all the king's provinces, into every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, that every man should bear rule in his own house, and that it should be published according to the language of every people.
All right, so there's our introduction to how Esther, which isn't her Hebrew name, but we'll get to that in chapter 2. But how she gets an opportunity to become queen because Vashti disobeys the king's commandment. And this is not a mere man, right? This is a very, very powerful king. And, even he has problems with women, right? But even though this is a pagan king, there is a point being made here that is a righteous point of view. If your household is not in proper order, the head of the household isn't the man, and the helpmeet isn't the woman, especially if it's a rebellious woman or just a bad toxic relationship. The example being made in the household will be seen by your children, your friends, and your family. And what will that do? That will influence those around you, how they treat you, how they perceive you, and how they grow up in their relationships in life. How the woman will treat their husbands, how they will look at them, what they would think their position needs to be in the home. This is a very valid point. They're saying that if the queen can disrespect the king, then why would any woman respect their man, their husband? If the king doesn't even have respect, regardless of, all the details of paganism, the simple fact is a man is biblically the head and he deserves respect as such, or the household will be wicked. It will be unrighteous. It will not bear good fruit. And your children, you will be molding your children to do the same thing. So let's go to the precepts. 1 Peter 3, 5, and 8. For after this manner in the old time, the Kodesh women also, who trusted in Elohim, ordained themselves, being subjection unto their own husbands, even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Adon, which is master, whose daughters ye are, as long as ye do well and are not afraid with any amazement. And I wanted to add verse 7 and 8 just for the husbands that, husbands don't get to do whatever they want, right? We have husbands in the head have pressure. We have pressure to actually lead and be what we're supposed to be as well. Not just women being submissive, but there are many men that need to be better leaders and decision makers for not just themselves, but their entire family. So likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto your wife, as unto the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. Finally, be ye all of one mind, having compassion one of another, love as brethren, be pitiful and be courageous. All of this is just saying, don't fight against what the word of the Most High tells you your position is. The more you fight being, like this hurts some women's feelings. But it's like a fact, like let's put our emotions to the side and just embrace that, yes, you are made the weaker vessel. But it's not because you're a pathetic person. It's because you are to be in a different position where you need to be magnified in as that vessel. Weaker vessel means the men just do harder stuff in a lot of ways. That doesn't mean you're not as important. Stop getting in your feelings and just do and try to magnify yourself as a Proverbs 31 woman. And like I said, same thing for the men. Men always want to get excited about that. Oh, yeah, you need to listen to me. But then times get hard and they look like the weakest leaders ever. And it's like, yeah, you see, you may get excited about the privilege of being the leader and the woman being submissive, but then they don't want to take the reign though. They don't want to be a true leader. I just want to give the precept. Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. That's Genesis 18:12. When he said, my Lord being old also. So just Sarah acknowledging Abraham as her master. How many wives would acknowledge their husband as their outright leader, master of the household? How many would that would do that? Not many nowadays. But you see, when Peter mentioned it, he made sure to call her a holy woman, saying that only holy women would be willing to do this to a husband, especially a deserving one. And lastly, First Timothy 3:5. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of Elohim? The man being the leader of the household is a reflection of him being a leader of the church. And, that you see, this corresponds with the whole balance of everything. The leader of the household is also given to be the leader of the church. This is the being a husband, a father, a leader is training for you to also lead in the works of the Most High's kingdom, right? They go one and the same. Everything's connected. There's no separation between church and state in Yasharallah. All of it is connected and have purpose when we follow his commandments wholly. All right, and that is chapter 1. Chapter 2.
Esther 2. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti, and what she had done, and what was decreed against her. Then said the kings as servants that ministered unto him, let there be fair young virgins sought for the king. And let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, unto the custody of Hegai, the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women, and let their things for purification be given them. And let the maiden, which pleaseth the king, be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Jew, whose name was Mordecai the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon had carried away.
All right, so we see that he was a part of the southern kingdom, but he is a Benjamite. As we say, we had Levites, Benjamites, and Jews, all a part of the southern kingdom. Verse 7.
And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful. whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter.
So we see Hadassah. Hadassah is the Hebrew name for Esther. Completely fine to call her Esther just so it's easy to, talk about. A lot of people doesn't know that, but it's important to know that. Now you can connect that Hadassah is Esther and it's more correct, right? A lot of the name change. All you got to do is read the book of Daniel. They changed their names the moment they went into captivity. So that's why a lot of them have pagan names after their captivity, right? All right. Oh, yes. And I did want to read chapter 2, verse 15 of what the Septuagint says the relationship is. And when the time was fulfilled for Esther, Hadassah, the daughter of Aminadab, the brother of Mordecai's father. So there you go. That's their relationship according to the Septuagint. Esther is, so that would make what, cousins or, yeah. What was that? Second cousins? Correct me if I'm wrong. Esther, the daughter of Aminadab, the brother of Mordecai's father. Yes. Uncle, niece, cousins. But there you have it. All right. Verse 8.
So it came to pass, when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace to the custody of Hegai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house to the custody of Hegai, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens, which were meet to be given her out of the king's house. And he preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the women. Esther had not shown her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it. And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house, to know how Esther did, and what should become of her. Now when every maid's turn was come to go in to King Ahasuerus, after that she had been 12 months, according to the manner of the women, for so were the days of their purifications accomplished, to wit, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for the purifying of the women. Then thus came every maiden unto the king. Whatsoever she desired was given her, to go with her out of the house of the women unto the king's house. In the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned into the second house of the women, to the custody of Shashgaz, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. She came in unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and that she were called by name. Now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go in unto the king, she required nothing but what Hegai the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. So Esther was taken unto King Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign.
And just wanted to stop it for the verse 15 there. Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. If you can remember all the stories throughout the Bible, this happens to many Israelites, that they find favor and people bless them and things around them are blessed, such as Jacob when he was with Laban, the father of Rachel and Leah, that everything was a more abundantly blessed that he was around. So this is a sign of his chosen. They will be a light, and that everyone around them will favor them, or the Most High will make a way one way or another, which is what this book's about. Verse 17.
And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head, and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast. And he made a release to the provinces, and gave gifts according to the state of the king. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not yet shown her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him.
All right, I just want to read verse 20 in the Septuagint here. Chapter 2, verse 20. Now Esther had not discovered her kindred, for so Mordecai commanded her to fear the Most High Elohim, and to perform his commandments. Mordecai's commandments is the commandments of the Most High. Even though, he's saying to conceal her lineage, the commandments of how she should live is not Mordecai's, just like it's not Moses's. It's the Most High's, right? As when she was with him. And Esther changed not her manner of life. That's the main part that's being focused here. In verse 20. Verse 21.
In those days, while Mordecai sat at the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those which kept the door, were wroth, and sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen. And Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. And when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king.
All right, so verses 21 through 23 has a precursor story of the dream vision that Mordecai had that enabled him to set all of this up, this is one of the biggest stories of the book. It's what helps save the people and to give recognition to the Jews. That Mordecai sat in the king's gate, and he listened and found out two chamberlains was conspiring against the king, and it was written in the Chronicles, the book of the Chronicles before the king. So let's go to that in chapter 1 in the Septuagint. They have it as an intro here, but I feel like it's better as it's spoken in chapter 2 here. So here is the story starting with the dream that sets up chapter 2, verses 21 through 23. And I read, in the second year of the reign of Artaxerxes, like I said, the same king, the great king, on the first day of Abib or Nisan, Mordecai, and we already have his introduction, tribe of Benjamin, a Jew dwelling in the city of Susa, a great man, serving in the king's palace, saw a vision. Now he was the captivity which Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried captive from Jerusalem, with Jeconias, the king of Judea. And this was his dream. Behold, voices and a noise, thunders and earthquake, tumult upon the earth. And behold, two great serpents came forth, both ready for conflict. And there came from them a great voice. And by their voice, every nation was prepared for battle, even to fight against the nation of the just. And behold, a day of darkness and blackness, tribulation and anguish, affliction and great tumult upon the earth. And all the righteous nation was troubled, fearing their own afflictions, and they prepared to die and cried to Elohim. And from their cry there came as it were a great river, from a little fountain, even much water. And light and the sun arose, and the lowly were exalted and devoured the honorable. This is obviously foreshadowing the entire book of Esther. And if you haven't read it, you will see that this is a dream. So it's done through animals and nature, but this is foreshadowing the conclusion of this book and that we will read. Verse, what's this? L. And Mordecai, who had seen this vision and what Elohim designed to do, having awoke, kept it in his heart and desired by all means to interpret it, even till night. And we see that this dream was not necessarily an interpretation that was needed to be given to Mordecai. This was foreshadowing of what's to come, and he was going to find out sooner or later, but it wasn't necessarily meant for immediate interpretation. Sometimes that's what dreams or visions are about. It's about just mentally preparing one's mind for what's to come. And remember, the Most High always tells his prophets one way or another before things happen. And Mordecai rested quiet in the palace with the two chamberlains, eunuchs who guarded the palace, and he heard their reasonings and searched out their plans and learned that they were preparing to lay hands on King Artaxerxes, and he informed the king concerning them. And the king examined the two chamberlains, and they confessed and were executed and hung on a tree. And the king wrote these things for a memorial. Also, Mordecai wrote concerning these things, and the king commanded Mordecai to attend in the palace. This comes later. This comes a few chapters later, but we're going to read it now. And gave him gifts for this service. And Amon, the son of etc., was honorable in the sight of the king. I just want to make a point that the Septuagint did right here in our face, that the lowly were exalted and devoured the honorable. And right here, who is named the honorable? Amon. In the sight of the king, and he endeavored to hurt Mordecai and his people because of the two chamberlains of the king. So pretty much he like, Mordecai snitched, man. And the chamberlains didn't. Nobody likes Mordecai, right? That's usually how it works. If you've been in this walk long enough, people will just not like you because of the way you live, because you keep the Most High's commandments, right? That's just what it is sometimes. Wicked people just don't like righteous people. Makes sense because we are who we are spiritually. Our actions describe our faith. And if we're on two different teams, most of the time that makes rivals and make you not like the other person as you would like someone else that has the same interest as you. All right. And that is the conclusion of chapter 2. The scene has been set. Esther is now queen. We just read the dream vision, and this is like the whole foundation is now set for the story to begin moving forward. And the beginning of the plot is with Haman, the honorable.
Esther 3. After these things, did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the princes that were with him.
So I didn't do this I didn't do this last year, but I was like, wait a minute. Everything has purpose. I need to search out the ancestors of Haman, the Agagite. And there is going to be meaning there. And of course, oh my goodness, the ancestors of Haman. Let's look into this. Let me see here. So let's first go to the picture. I looked up Yeah, a Gagite. I will overtop. Let's remember that. I will overtop. This is a part of prophecy that we will see. And we see that Haman is a Gagagite. And now let's go down a little scripture rabbit hole here. We see in First Samuel. So he's a Gagite, which is a descendant from Agag. And he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites. So Agag is a Amalekite. And if you have read the Torah, this should be ringing in your ear like, wait a minute, aren't these the enemies of the Israelites? From the time that they left Egypt, they've been one of the biggest enemies of the Israelites. And look what we have here. This is what scripture does. Everything's tied from end to end. So Haman is a part of the Amalekites. And looking at First Samuel, it just this is the story of when Saul was supposed to destroy the Amalekites, but then Saul was doing what he wanted to do. And then in verse 33, Samuel said, as thy sword has made women childless, so shall thy mother be childless among women. And Samuel hewed Agag in pieces before the Most High in Gilgal. And so that's one of my favorite things. Just Samuel was like, a real priest of the Most High handling business that Saul didn't keep. But continuing with this story of the Amalekites, now that we got the identity of his father being amongst the Amalekites and actually king of the Amalekites, we see going deeper, the Amalekites is from the lineage of Esau. The Amalekites is from Amalek. Amalek is a son of Esau. Woo! All right. So he's a Gagatite, whatever how you pronounce it, which was a king of the Amalekites. He's a Amalekites. And Amalekites is from Amalek, and Amalek is a Edomite. Crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. So we have all of this deep-rooted like friction, very deep-rooted friction between Israelites and Amalekites. We're going to focus on the Amalekites here. Going into this story, I told you this, they've been enemies from the beginning, and Deuteronomy 25:17 through 19 summarizes this for us. Remember what Amalek did unto thee by the way, when ye were come forth out of Egypt, how he met thee by the way and smote the hindmost of thee. So the ones at the back of the Exodus, even all that were feeble behind thee, when thou was faint and weary, and he feared not the Most High. So he went, instead of coming with the army to the front, where the strongest was, he went and cowardly attacked the weakest ones when they were tired and faint-hearted. And there was no fear in them. Therefore it shall be, when the Most High has given thee rest from all thy enemies round about, in the land which the Most High thy Elohim giveth thee for an inheritance to possess it, that thou shalt blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven, thou shalt not forget it. And that's what was happening in First Samuel, and that's why Samuel did that deed in honor of this commandment that King Saul did not uphold. So, whoo! Look at all that what we're building here just from seeing Mordecai versus Haman, because that's a lot of what this story is about. Two chamberlains and those that worked along with the king. Numbers 24:7. This is the prophecy. This is a prophecy from actually Balaam. In the Numbers 24 verse 7, He shall pour the water out of his buckets, and his seed shall be in many waters. Dispersed. This is, I'll tell you, what we're reading, this is the prophecy of Esther. Listen. He shall pour the water out of his buckets, and his seed shall be in many waters. The waters represents nations. He dispersed his peoples. This is the captivity. And his king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. The time where they are exalted over Agag in the captivity is the book of Esther. And that's why I was saying, remember, not here. Remember that Agag means I will overtop. But he makes it clear that you will be higher than Agag, which literally means to overtop. Haman tries to overtop them with his superiority with the king, but when they are dispersed, they shall be made higher than Agag. And oh my goodness, this is your first time reading it, the foreshadowing and the rivalry and the history, just like any good sports story, is here. It is here. All right, so that being said, that is the lineage and history of a Haman. All right, now verse 2, chapter 3.
And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman. For the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. Then the king's servants which were in the king's gate said unto Mordecai, Why transgressest thou the king's commandment? Now it came to pass, when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman, to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand. For he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had shown him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. In the first month, that is, the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is, the lot before Haman from day to day, and from month to the 12th month, that is, the month Adar. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business, to bring it into the king's treasuries. And the king took his ring from his hand, and gave it unto Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And the king said unto Haman, The silver is given to thee, the people also, to do with them as it seemeth good to thee.
You see how they set it up? This is what I was saying. How in verse 10, when they didn't just say Haman, the Jews' enemy, they said Haman, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. That's why I was saying there is meaning behind his lineage that has been the Jews' enemy since the Exodus. Verse 12.
Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants, and to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people of every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, in the name of King Ahasuerus was it written, and sealed with the king's ring. And the letter.
And so we see that the timing of all of this is exactly why we're doing the memorial of Purim on this very day. As we saw in verses 7 through 11, that in the first month that they cast a pur, and that is a lot to decide when the month and the day for the execution of the Jews will be. If you don't know what casting a lot is, it's pretty much drawing random. They did it differently with rocks, stones, or other elements in ancient times, but it was a random draw. That's what that means. That they were drawing randomly when this should happen. And that's where the name origin starts from. It gets more developed in chapter 9 when it reviews everything, but just want to make sure we're understanding there. And so now, verse 13, the letter.
Were sent by posts into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. The copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. The posts went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace, and the king and Haman sat down to drink. But the city Shushan was perplexed.
All right, so Septuagint has that letter. We're going to go and read the letter that Haman sent out to every province of the king. All right, here. Verse 13 in the Septuagint, chapter 3, and they have it separated by letters. We have 13a, 13b. We're going to read all the way through it to 13g. The following is the copy of the letter that the king Artaxerxes writes thus to the rulers, inferior governors of 127 provinces from India even to Ethiopia, who hold authority unto him, ruling over many nations, and having obtained dominion over the whole world. I was minded, not elated by the confidence of power, but ever conducting myself with great moderation and with gentleness, to make the lives of my subjects continually tranquil, desiring both to maintain the kingdom quiet and orderly to its utmost limits, and to restore the peace desired by all men. But when I had inquired of my counselors how this should be brought to pass, Amen, who excels in soundness of judgment among us. You see, you can tell who wrote this, right? Amen, who excels in soundness of judgment amongst us, and has been manifestly well inclined without wavering, and with unshaken fidelity, and has obtained the second post in the kingdom, informed us that a certain ill-disposed people is mixed up with all the tribes throughout the world. Let me stop right there. That's what I was talking about. His seed shall be in many waters. Opposed in their laws to every other nation, and continually neglecting the commands of the kings, so that the united government blamelessly administered by us is not quietly established. Having then conceived that this nation alone of all others is continually set in opposition to every man. Yes, we are called to be set apart. Introducing as a change a foreign code of laws, and injuriously plotting to accomplish the worst of evils against our interests and against the happy establishment of the monarchy. We have accordingly appointed those who are signified to you in the letters written by Amen, who is set over the public affairs and is our second governor, to destroy them all utterly, with their wives and children, by the swords of the enemies, without pitying or sparing any, on the 14th day of the 12th month, which is Adar, of the present year, that the people aforetime and now ill disposed to us have been violently consigned to death in one day, may hereafter secure to us continually as well constituted in quiet state of affairs. Well, they hate us because they ain't us. All right. They don't like your light. There's nothing new under the sun. And that will be the completion of chapter 3. Let's begin 4.
Esther 4. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes, and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and cried with a loud and bitter cry, and came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting, and weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told it her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai, and to take away his sackcloth from him. But he received it not. Then called Esther for Hatach, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai, to know what it was and why it was. So Hatach went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city which was before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of the money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them. Also he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king, to make supplication unto him, and to make request before him for her people. And Hatach came, and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again Esther spake unto Hatach, and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and all the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his, to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, Think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house, more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this?
Amen. That's one of the most used verses from the book of Esther. Chapter 4, verse 14, specifically that last sentence. Understand that we all are born in divine time. We have our own purpose spiritually. You were put here for a reason, just as Moses was put at his appointed time in history for his purpose. We may not have as big as a purpose as Moses in a sense of the kingdom. Everyone has different journeys and different body parts of the body of Mashiach to work. But regardless of what your mission is and your duty individually for the kingdom of the Most High, you were born for a time that you are in. So magnify yourself in it. All right, let's finish off this chapter, verse 15.
Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. Go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish.
Do or die. And I mean it. Abba wants those that are willing to die for him. And obviously, this is, for his people as well in this story, but do or die. You either are for him or against him. There's only two sides. There's only going to be the goats and the sheep, which we will read at the end of this book. There is going to be a separation. There are going to be two lots. Choose this day life that you may live. Belief in the only begotten Son through the Father's blessings and keep his commandments. And I wanted to go into the praying and fasting. We know that this is in line with the rest of the word, as our Mashiach says in Matthew 17:21, howbeit this kind goeth not out but by prayer and fasting. He's talking about demons, but can be the same perspective in any of the hardest times you can have. You seek him through prayer and fasting. In Isaiah 58:6, is not this the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, and that ye break every yoke? When times are hard, this is when you tap even more so into the Ruach. You fast and pray. You don't cry. You don't complain. You fast and pray. Yes, we have our emotions, we have our stress, we can vent, but real righteous individuals seek the Most High through their actions of faith by doing these works that we read about all throughout the scriptures. And verse 17.
So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him.
And in the Septuagint, Mordecai pleads in prayer to the Most High for his people. So let's go read that now. All right. This is kind of long, but we're going to get through it. All right. So this is the end of what we just read, and the rest is the prayer. And he besought the Adon, making mention of all the works of the Adon, and he said, Adon Elohim, king, ruler over all, for all things are in thy power, and there is no one that shall oppose thee in thy purpose to save, Yasharallah. For thou hast made the heaven and the earth and every wonderful thing in the world under heaven, and thou art Adon, master of all, and there is no one who shall resist thee, Adon. Thou knoweth all things. Thou knoweth, Hayah, that it is not in insolence or haughtiness, nor love of glory that I have done this, to refuse obedience to the haughty Amen. For I would gladly have kissed the soles of his feet for the safety of Yasharallah, but I have done this that I might not set the glory of a man above the glory of Elohim. I will not worship any one except thee, my Adon. I will not do these things in haughtiness. For now, O Adon Elohim, the king, the Elohim of Abram, spare thy people, for our enemies are looking upon us to our destruction, and they have desired to destroy thy ancient inheritance. Do not overlook thy peculiar people, whom thou hast redeemed for thyself out of the land of Egypt. Hearken to my prayer and be propitious to thy inheritance, and turn our mourning into gladness, that we may live and sing praise to thy name, O Hayah, and do not utterly destroy the mouth of them that praise thee, O Adon. And all Yasharallah cried with all their might, for their death was before their eyes. And Queen Esther, Hadassah, betook herself for refuge to the Adon, being taken as it were in the agony of death. And having taken off her glorious apparel, she put on garments of distress and mourning. And instead of grand perfumes, she filled her head with ashes and dung. And she greatly brought down her body, and she filled every place of her glad adoring with torn curls of her hair. And she besought the Adon Elohim of Yasharallah and said, My Adon, thou alone art our king. Help me, who am destitute and have no helper but thee, for my danger is near at hand. I have heard from my birth in the tribe of my kindred that thou, Adon, tooketh Yasharallah out of all the nations and our fathers out of their kindred for perpetual inheritance, and has wrought for them all that thou hast said. And now we have sinned before thee, and thou hast delivered us into the hands of our enemies, because we honored their gods. Thou art righteous, O Adon. But now have not been contented with the bitterness of our slavery, but have laid their hands on the hands of their idols in order to abolish the decree of thy mouth and utterly to destroy thy inheritance, and to stop the mouth of them that praise thee, and to extinguish the glory of thy house and thy altar, and to open the mouth of the Gentiles, and to speak to the praises of vanities, in order that the mortal king should be admired forever. O Adon, do not resign thy scepter to them that are not, and let them not laugh at our fall, but turn their counsel against themselves, and make an example of him who has begun to injure us. Remember us, O Adon, manifest thyself in the time of our affliction, and encourage me. O King of gods and ruler of all dominion, put harmonious speech into my mouth before the lion, and turn his heart to hate him that fights against us, to the utter destruction of him and of them that consent with him. But deliver us by thy hand, and put them who am destitute and have none but thee. O Adon, thou knowest all things, and knoweth that I hate the glory of transgressors, and that I abhor the couch of the uncircumcised and of every stranger. Thou knowest my necessity, for I abhor the symbol of my proud station, which is upon my head in the days of my splendor. I abhorred it as mistress cloth, and I wear it not in the days of my tranquility. And thy handmaid has not eaten at the table of Ammon, and I have not honored the banquet of the king, neither have I drunk wine of libations. Neither has thy handmaid rejoiced since the day of my promotion until now, except in thee, O Adon Elohim of Abraham. O Elohim, who has power over all, hearken to the voice of the desperate, and deliver us from the hand of them that despise mischief, and deliver me from my fear. Oh my goodness. Some very beautiful prayers from Mordecai and Esther, but Esther's particularly what she prayed for in the details is going to come into fruition by the end of this book. And that is chapter 4. Sorry, guys. I don't know if y'all see my little video. My cat is in my lap, and she is a bit distractive. I literally try to push her off, and she won't move. She's in a mood. She wants some attention, and I can't get rid of her right now. All right, chapter 5, verse 1.
Esther 5. Now it came to pass on the third day that Esther put on her royal apparel, and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house. And the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house, over against the gate of the house.
All right, so before we continue, at the beginning of the request, I wanted to let me see. Let me see. No, let me. Yes, I'll wait a little bit. Actually, let me see. We'll read that in a second. Let's continue. Verse 2.
And it was so, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near, and touched the top of the scepter. Then said the king unto her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be even given thee to the half of the kingdom.
Okay, so we just read the beautiful prayer from Mordecai and Esther, and how Esther prayed for mercy and the grace of her people, and that to pretty much soften the king's heart to hear her. And we already see it happening right here. But it doesn't go into the details that the Septuagint gives us. So let's read about after the third day fast. Remember, they did 3-day fast. So that's what it means that after the third day came to pass, that she went into the inner court of the king, which she was not supposed to be in there. And she could be put to death if the king felt like it was disrespectful. Oh my goodness. I didn't even think about that, Avy. Thank you. I'm reading the book of Esther, and the cat that is in my face, this is not normal. Her name is Esty, named after Esther. That is funny. You see Abba? Abba's in everything, guys. I don't care what anybody say. Abba, creator of heaven and earth, has a sense of humor right now. You know, he's got my cat Esther all up in my face. That is hilarious. How appropriate, right? That is funny. She's like, why you keep saying my name? Okay, I gotta get back to reading, girl. Goodness, she is being the most right now. Let me put the camera down a little bit. Look at this. If y'all see her, look at her. She's just all over me. She's being so much right now. Okay. All right. All right. So we just read Esther coming to the king, but it leaves out so many details that the Septuagint gives us. So we're going to read Septuagint verse 1, but it's going to be with the letters because it's not with the standard verses of the KJV or that we're reading. So we're reading all of this. All of this is not in the KJV right now. All right, but I'm going to read verse 1. And it came to pass on the third day, when she had ceased praying, that she put off her mean dress and put on her glorious apparel. And being splendidly arrayed, and having called upon Elohim, the overseer and preserver of all things, she took her 2 maids, and she leaned upon one as a delicate female, and the other followed, bearing her train. And she was blooming in the perfection of her beauty, and her face was cheerful, as it were benevolent, but her heart was straitened for fear. And having passed through all the doors, she stood before the king. And he was sitting upon his royal throne, and he had put on all his glorious apparel, covered all over with gold and precious stones, and was very terrible. And having raised his face resplendent with glory, he looked with intense anger. And the queen fell and changed her color as she fainted, and she bowed herself upon the head of the maid that went before her. But the Most High Elohim changed the Ruach, the spirit of the king, to gentleness. And in intense feeling, he sprang from off his throne and took her into his arms until she recovered. And he comforted her with peaceable words and said to her, "What is the matter, Esther, Hadassah? I am thy brother. Be of good cheer, and thou shalt not die. For our command is openly declared to thee, draw nigh." And he raised his golden scepter, and that's where we're at in verse 4.
And Esther answered, If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther hath said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed. Then answered Esther and said, My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king hath said. Then went Haman forth that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless Haman refrained himself. And when he came home, he sent and called for his friends, and Zeresh his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches, and the multitude of his children, and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. Haman said moreover, Yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared, but myself, and tomorrow am I invited unto her also with the king. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, Let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king, that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made.
So, man, he couldn't wait till the 12th month of Adar, right, to do the execution of the Jews. He's trying to execute Mordecai ASAP, and of course this is going to be flipped on his head. But let's I'm gonna say, goodness, let's look at a picture of what a gallows is. Excuse me. So it's pretty much where you hang an individual. Obviously, it could look a little different, but you get the gist. And that is chapter 5.
Esther 6. On that night could not the king sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king.
All right, so let's remember what was written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings. The thing that I said that was the foundation of this story with Mordecai and the two chamberlains, right? But I just wanted to read verse 1 in the Septuagint because it says, On that night the king could not sleep, right? In the Septuagint, chapter 6, verse 1, it says, But the Adon, the Most High, Elohim, removed sleep from the king that night, and he told his servants to bring in the books. And that detail just shows you that the Most High has his hand in everything. The Most High is everywhere. You could believe it or not, but he is. He's the reason why the king couldn't sleep, so the king would open up the book of the Chronicles of the King so he could now see the righteousness of Mordecai. And remember, this is the morning or the night before Haman is trying to convince the king to prosecute Mordecai. Very important timing for this night. It had to happen on this night, is what I'm saying. Verse 2.
And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the king said, What honor and dignity hath been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, There is nothing done for him. And the king said, Who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house, to speak unto the king, to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servants said unto him, Behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, Let him come in. So Haman came in. And the king said unto him, What shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, To whom would the king delight to honor, more than to myself? And Haman answered the king, For the man whom the king delighteth to honor, let the royal apparel be brought which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man withal whom the king delighted to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighteth to honor. And the king said to Haman, Make haste, and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew, that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, Thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hasted to his house mourning, and having his head covered. And Haman told Zeresh his wife, and all his friends, everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men, and Zeresh his wife unto him, If Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shalt surely fall before him. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains, and hasted to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared.
We are already seeing the foreshadowing of this prophetic message. And his king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. It's happening. It's happening. And that is chapter 6.
Esther 7. So the king and Haman came to banquet with Esther the queen. And the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, Who is he? And where is he that durst presume in his heart to do so? And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine, in his wrath went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine. And Haman was fallen upon the bed, whereon Esther was. Then said the king, Will he force the queen also before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face.
Man, oh, the Most High, man, works in mysterious ways. You imagine Haman's face, right? And then he says, are you gonna force yourself on my wife in my home too? Like, that's how you know Haman knew he was done. Now he's getting accused of trying to rape the queen or something. I mean, just whoo, how things just works when the Most High's hands is on it.
And Harbona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, Behold also the gallows, 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him thereon. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified.
And this all, if we go back and read it, this lines up perfectly with the request that Esther had for the Most High to be redeemed. Chapter 8.
Esther 8. On that day did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, unto Esther the queen. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. And Esther spake yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. Then the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. So Esther arose, and stood before the king, and said, If it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the things seem right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews, which are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen, and to Mordecai the Jew, Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he laid his hand upon the Jews. Write ye also for the Jews, as it liketh you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the writing which is written in the king's name, and sealed with the king's ring, may no man reverse. Then were the king's scribes called at that time in the 3rd month, that is, the month Sivan, on the 23 day thereof. And it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants, and the deputies and rulers of the provinces which are from India unto Ethiopia, 127 provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and unto every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writing, and according to their language. And he wrote in the king Ahasuerus' name, and sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by posts, on horseback, and riders on mules, camels, and young dromedaries, wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together, and to stand for their life, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people in province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. Upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely, upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, the copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, and that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies.
Let's read the letter. Copy of the letter is in the Septuagint, chapter 8. It is quite long, 12a to 12x. Pretty much the whole alphabet, right? The following is the copy of the letter of the orders. The great king Artaxerxes, sends greetings to the rulers of the provinces in 127 satrapies from India to Ethiopia, even to those who are faithful to our interests, many who have been frequently honored by the most abundant kindness of their benefactors, have conceived ambitious designs and not only endeavors to hurt our subjects, but moreover, not being able to bear prosperity, they also endeavor to plot against their own benefactors. And they not only would utterly abolish gratitude from among men, but also elated by the boastings of men who are strangers to all that is good. They suppose that they shall escape the sin-hating vengeance of the ever-seeing Allahim, and oftentimes evil extortion has made partakers of the guilt of shedding innocent blood and has involved in irremediable uh, remediable calamities. Many of those who were appointed to offices of authority, who had been entrusted with the management of their friends' affairs, while men, by the false uh, that word of evil disposition, have deceived the simple candor of the ruler's powers. And it is possible to see this not so much from more ancient traditionary accounts as it is immediately in your power to see it by examining what things have been wickedly perpetrated by the baseness of men unworthy holding power. And it is right to take heed with regard to the future, that we may maintain the government in undisturbed peace for all men, adopting needful changes and ever judging those cases which come under our notion with truly equitable decision. 12K. For whereas Ammon, the Macedonian, the son of Meladath, in reality an alien from the blood of Persians, differing widely from our mild course of government, having been hospitable, entertained by us, obtained so large a share of our universal kindness as to be called our father, and to continue the person next to the royal throne, reverence of all. He, however, overcome by the pride of his station, endeavored to deprive us of our dominion in our life, having by various and subtle artifices demanded for destruction both Mordecai, our deliverer and perpetual benefactor, and Esther, the blameless consort of our kingdom, with their whole nation. For by these methods he thought, having surprised us in a defenseless state, to transfer the dominion of the Persians to the Macedonians. But we find that the Jews, who have been consigned to destruction by the most abominable of men, are not malefactors, but living according to the justice laws, and being the sons of the living Allahim, the Most High and Mighty, who maintains the kingdom to us as well as to our forefathers in the most excellent order. Ye will therefore do well in refusing to obey the letters sent by Haman, because he that has done these things has been hanged with his whole family at the gates of Susa. Almighty Allahim having swiftly returned to him a worthy recompense. We enjoin you then, having openly published a copy of this letter in every place, to give the Jews permission to use their own lawful customs and to strengthen them, that on the 13th of the 12th month of Adar, on the self same day, they may defend themselves against those who attack them in a time of affliction. For in the place of the destruction of the chosen race, Almighty Elohim has granted them this time of gladness. Do ye therefore also among your notable feasts keep a distinct day with all festivity, that both now and hereafter it may be a day of deliverance to us and those who are well disposed towards the Persians, but to those that plotted against us a memorial of destruction. That's what this feast is about. It's Abba turning darkness into light, pulling his people out of a destruction and making it a day of gladness. In every city and province collectively, which shall not do accordingly, shall be consumed with vengeance by spear and fire. It shall be made not only insensible to men, but also most hateful to wild beasts and birds forever. And that is a copy of the letter. All right. Let's finish chapter 8 now, verse 14.
So the posts that rode upon mules and camels went out, being hastened and pressed on by the king's commandment. And the decree was given at Shushan the palace. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple, and the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light, and gladness, and joy, and honor. And in every province, and in every city whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them.
And many of the people of the land became Jews. This takes me to Numbers 15. 15 and 16. One ordinance shall be both for you of the congregation and also for the stranger that sojourns with you, an ordinance forever in your generations. As ye are, so shall the stranger be before the Most High. One law and one manner shall be for you and for the stranger that sojourns with you. In Isaiah 56 and 6, also the sons of the stranger that join themselves to the Most High to serve him and to love the name of Ahiah, to be his servants, and everyone that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it and taketh hold of my covenant. Amen. And now, chapter 9. The chapter of the day that it all happens, the memorial, and all of it becomes instilled.
Esther 9. Now in the 12th month, that is the month Adar, of the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them. The Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, to lay hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon all people. And all the rulers of the provinces, and the lieutenants and the deputies, and officers of the king, helped the Jews because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. But this man, Mordecai, waxed greater and greater. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And in Shushan the palace the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. And Parishandatha, and Dalphon, and Aspartha, and Poratha, and Adalia, and Aradatha, and Parmashta, and Arisai, and Aradai, and Vajezatha, the 10 sons of Haman, the sons of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, slew they, but on the spoil laid they not their hand. On that day the number of those that were slain in Shushan the palace was brought before the king. And the king said unto Esther the queen, The Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the palace, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. Or what is thy request further? And it shall be done. Then said Esther, If it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow also according unto this day's decree, and that Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. And the king commanded it so to be done. And the decree was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons.
That's another part of Esther's prayer request, is to destroy the line of those that was trying to destroy the line of his chosen.
For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan. But on the prey they laid not their hand. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together, and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 75,000. But they laid not their hands on the prey. On the 13th day of the month Adar, on the 14th day of the same, rested they, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews that were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th thereof, and on the 15th day of the same they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages that dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, and of sending portions one to another.
That is today.
And Mordecai wrote these things, and sent letters unto all the Jews that were in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both nigh and far, to establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar, and the 15th day of the same yearly, as the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions one to another, and gifts to the poor. And the Jews undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written unto them, because Haman the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast pur, that is, the lot, to consume them, and to destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he devised against the Jews, should return upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Wherefore they called these days Purim, after the name of Pur. Therefore, for all the words of this letter, and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Jews ordained, and took upon them, and upon their seed, and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so as it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing and according to their appointed time every year, and that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed.
And so once again, we see the definition that we covered in the very beginning, that pur, it means lot, because the lots of Haman drew to determine the day of the destruction of the Jews. And we see that that was turned into gladness and feasting, which is what we should do in this memorial. And one of those days always fall on the Shabbat, a day of rest. I think that's by no coincidence, right?
Then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter of Purim. And he sent the letters unto all the Jews, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoined them, and as they had decreed for themselves and for their seed the matters of the fastings and their cry. And the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book.
And I just had Esther 3:6 was the other time. Oh, oh, excuse me. This is supposed to be 3:7, but it's just the Purim definition. But 3:7 is connected with what we're reading right here at the end of chapter 9 for that definition there. And that is chapter 9. Oh, I wanted to read verse 31 in the Septuagint for chapter 9. And Mordecai and Esther had the queen appointed a fast for themselves privately, even at that time, also having formed their plan against their own health. That's, I don't know, translated a little weird. Um, but yeah, I just want to that part there, just showing that even after the everything was over and they were declaring the festival of Purim, they fasted privately, obviously, to submit themselves to the Most High in thanks and gratitude of from all the deliverance from the tribulation. And we are at the last chapter of this story.
Esther 10. And the king Ahasuerus laid a tribute upon the land, and upon the isles of the sea, and all the acts of his power and of his might, and the declaration of the greatness of Mordecai whereunto the king advanced him, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was next unto King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and accepted of the multitude of his brethren, seeking the wealth of his people, and speaking peace to all his seed.
This, I'm telling you, I just wholeheartedly I believe that this story has a very big connection with this prophecy in I passed it in Numbers 24:7. Just want to say that 24:7. I really think that Esther, the book of Esther, might be the full, very close to the full fulfillment of this prophecy. Of course, it could be even more fulfilled, talking about kingship when his people are chosen and separated and made royal priesthood in the kingdom. But in the time of his people being dispersed, the book of Esther is foreshadowing of what will come to pass because there's nothing new under the sun. And so, chapter 10 here has a outro of Mordecai that I'm going to read from the Septuagint 3a to 3k. And Mordecai said, "These things have been done of Allahim, for I remember the dream which I had concerning these matters. For not one particular of them has failed. There was the little fountain, which became a river, and there was light in the sun and much water. The river is Esther, whom the king married and made queen. The two serpents are I and Haman, and the nations are those nations that combine to destroy the name of the Jews. But as for my nation, this is Yasharallah, even they that cried to Allahim were delivered. For the Adon delivered his people, and the Adon rescued us out of all these calamities. And Allahim wrought such signs and great wonders as have not been done among the nations. Therefore did he ordain two lots, one for the people of Allahim, and one for all the other nations. This, what we're reading, this is the summary of what this memorial is all about. These two lots came for an appointed season and for a day of judgment before Allahim and for all the nations. And Allahim remembered his people and vindicated his inheritance. And they shall observe these days in the month of Adar on the 14th and the 15th day of the month with an assembly in joy and gladness before Elohim throughout the generations, forever among his people, Yasharallah. This is foreshadowing of what's to come. There is going to be two lots. There are two teams, Abba's team and Hasatan's. There's no in between. As our Mashiach says in Matthew 25, I will be reading verses 31 to 46. When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory, and before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep in his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungered, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, ye gave me drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me in. Naked, ye clothed me. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and ye came unto me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Adon, when saw we thee and hungry and fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink? And when saw we thee a stranger and took thee in, or naked and clothed thee? Or when saw we thee sick or in prison and came unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. Then shall he say also unto them on the left hand, the goats, Depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungered, and ye gave me no meat. I was thirsty, ye gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me not in. Naked, and ye clothed me not. Sick and in prison, and ye visit me not. Then shall they also answer him, saying, Adon, when saw we then a hungered, a thirst, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, or did not minister unto thee? Then shall he say, then shall he answer them, saying, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye did it not to one of the least of these, ye did not to me. And these shall go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into life eternal. Pick a side. Do the will of the Most High. Pretty much is summarizing. You do the will of the Most High, which also is not just keeping the commandments. Remember, the Pharisees kept the commandments, but they also kept the commandments of men. The Pharisees kept the commandments, but they also had a heart of stone. It was not a heart of flesh. They did not care about others. We got to have a heart of compassion. We got to care about others just as Mashiach came to care about us. Keep his commandments and have compassion for one another and be meek, be humble. Don't be like Haman. And I want to finish off this reading of the book of Esther, the story of Purim, the festival of lots with Psalms 23. Ahaya is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of Ahiah forever. Oh, man. Tawad Abba for this day. And may you show mercy to us all. Shalom, and thank y'all for joining me for this story that we call Purim.